Hi and welcome. Today I want to have a look at how much deposit rental agents should be holding in terms of the lease to protect their landlords the most. So in this video I'm going to cover essentially the basic of rental deposits, which is when can the deposit be used as well as what can the deposit be used for. Then we're going to look at what's the most common use of the deposit, and after that we're going to finish off by how much deposit you need to hold to protect your landlord. So firstly, let's have a look at when the deposit can be used. This is written in legislation in terms of the Rental Housing Act. The deposit can be used on the expiration of the lease. So in other words, the deposit can only be used at the end of the lease. You cannot use the deposit during the period of the lease, for example, for rent topping up or for the last month's rent. I've had an example, for example, where a landlord and tenant agreed to release a portion of the deposit to pay for a huge water bill and then they'd give it back. That's not permitted in terms of the Residential Housing Act. Secondly, what can the deposit be used for? Once again, the Housing Act gives us clarity on this. It can be used for any amount, but remember this is at the end of the lease, any amount for which the tenant is liable in terms of under the lease. So we're looking at things like rent, security, pool or garden services, if that's been agreed in the lease, as well as the cost of repairing damage to the dwelling during the lease period. And then they've put in this funny thing about the cost of replacing lost keys. So the deposit can only be used to cover rent and other contractual arrears or damage to the property and the cost of replacing lost keys. What's the most common use of the deposit? Well, in my almost 20 years of rental management, I think it's an absolute fact. The most common use of the damage deposit at the end of the lease would be rent arrears. Of course, there's things like damages, but rent arrears is certainly by far the most common use and the most common debt owing at the end of the lease. It's also the largest. So the most common use is rent arrears. So taking all of that into account, what we can use it for, when we can use it for, as well as what the most common use of the deposit is, how much deposit do you need to ensure that you can cover the rent arrears and protect your landlord as best as possible? I think the easiest way to cover this is to look at how rent arrears accumulates. So let's start off with a typical month. Let's call it month number 1, and the rent is due on the 1st of the month. If the rent's paid, then obviously we don't have any issue. The issue only comes if the rent is not paid or the rent is not paid in full. So what do you do then? I think the right thing to do is that you can only do this on the 2nd, obviously, because the 1st goes until midnight on the 1st. So when you get in on the 2nd, you draw your banking in for example, and you have a look who hasn't paid yet. And I think the right thing to do the first time is to send your tenant a courtesy reminder, or to give them a ring, send them an email, send them an SMS, whatever it is you do to send them a reminder. But I think that's the right thing to do. I would love to be able to take the next legal step on this day, but I just, often you have problems like debit orders and things like that haven't run, or some issue with the bank. So I think it's only fair to give the tenant the opportunity and to give them a call first. Of course, the question is what happens when they don't like your friendly reminder or they don't listen to your friendly reminder? Then you need to take what is the first legal step. And I think you need to take this as early as possible. The reason is there's a process that you have to go through to follow up on these things. And the process starts with giving the tenants notice that they're in breach of their lease agreement. And this is prescribed under the Consumer Protection Act. So when you send a letter of demand or a breach, you're saying to the tenant, I'm formally putting you on notice that you're in breach of your lease agreement. And as permitted under the Consumer Protection Act, I have to give you, or I am giving you, 20 business days notice to rectify this breach. That's all you can do legally. Of course, you continue to call them, to harangue them, to harass them, to not threaten them, but to do what you need to do to follow up so that you can give your landlord feedback that you're doing. But I think it's crucial, well, I know it's crucial that you take the first legal step. If they pay, then all of this becomes null and void and a moot point because it all falls away. But the problem is you're protecting your landlord for when things don't go the right way. And I think that's the most important thing. So on the third business day, I think at the latest, or the fourth, you should be sending a letter of demand. And the letter of demand is what you are permitted to do in terms of the Consumer Protection Act. We are accepting here that we're in a fixed term lease. So third business day, you send your letter of demand. Now, letters of demand should be sent by registered post. And this is something that a lot of people don't do. The reason is I've had occasion where, for example, people have hand delivered it. They've sent it by normal post. The problem is the proof that the letter has been sent and the proof that the letter has been received. Once again, if everything gets paid, this isn't an issue. We're preparing, however, for if things don't go the right way, worst case scenario, you end up in court, you end up somewhere, and you have to prove that the letter has been sent. The courts will accept that a letter of demand that was sent by registered post has been delivered in 4 business days. This, of course, now adds to your period before you can take the next legal step, because now you've got 20 business days for your letter of demand, and you've got 4 business days for delivery of the registered post. So let's see how this maps out on a calendar. So you're sending registered post on the 4th business day. The registered post is deemed to have been delivered. So in this particular month, we're looking at the 9th. Now we start ticking and counting out our 20 business days that are required in terms of the letter of demand as prescribed by the Consumer Protection Act. And you'll see that when we get to day number 16 in this particular case, we're at the end of the month. We haven't yet got to our 20 business days. So now we're going to have to move into the next month. And there you are. By the time you've followed or you've counted and allowed for the 20 prescribed business days as well as the 4 business days for the registered post, you're at the 6th of the next month. And on the 1st, you'll see another star there. It's not a good star. This is actually a bad star because you've passed another due date. So in all likelihood, the rent is now 2 months behind because, let's face it, if they didn't have the money to pay in full or at all on the 1st of month number 1, there isn't going to be money to pay in full or at all in month number 2. So quite possibly or probably, the rent is now 2 months in arrears. You can only then now cancel on, in this particular case, the 7th of the next month. And you have to allow for cancellation. Now, and you have to give time for that. So by the time you can cancel the lease legally, you're sitting with 2 months rent arrears. So in summary, the rent's not paid. The first formal step is to send a letter of breach or letter of demand, and only then can you legally cancel the lease. Remember, we're talking about fixed term leases here. So if you count there, you've got 20 business days before cancellation in terms of the LOD, plus 4 business days for registered post. So you're looking at about 5 weeks, which means that you've moved into the next month. And by then you've got 2 months rent arrears. We're not even taking into account something like damages to the property here. We're only looking at rent arrears. In conclusion, as far as I'm concerned, and my advice to you and to landlords is to hold a minimum of 2 months rent as deposit, just to cover potential rent arrears if things go wrong. Remember the deposit, the tenant's getting interest on the deposit. The deposit's held in an interest-bearing account. So you've got, the only reason for this is that this is the security the landlord holds in terms of the lease. And you have to take enough to protect them as much as what you possibly can. So that's my story. I hope you found this useful. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video or subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more videos that I'll be releasing as we go forward. And leave a comment below just to let me know whether you found this useful or not. Also, please share this with any, especially people that are new to property rentals. I'd like to reach as many of them as possible to help them learn to do rentals the right way. Also, if you'd like to, you can see the written article on my blog. You can subscribe to my email newsletter, and you can connect with me on social media. All the links are in the description below. I'm looking for some ideas for new videos. So if you're new to residential rentals and you have any questions or something you'd like me to address, please let me know and I'll see if I can use that as a topic for for new videos, or just pop it in the comments below, or pop me an email at sean@seanlate.co.za. Thank you, and I hope you have a great day.